My name is Melissa Ziobro, and I am the Specialist Professor of Public History at Monmouth University in West Long Branch, New Jersey. Today is October 6th, 2022. We're here today with Fred Pachman for an interview project organized by the Mid-Atlantic Regional Archives Conference New Jersey Caucus, intended to document the history of MARAC as it celebrates its 50th anniversary. This interview is being recorded with the permission of all participants. Fred, can you just verbally confirm for me that you do indeed consent to the recording and that you understand this interview will be accessible to the public?
Yes, I understand all that, and I consent to the recording.
Thank you. All right, tell us a little bit about your early life. Like, when and where were you born and raised?
Well, I'm a Jersey boy. Born up in Paterson, New Jersey, Paterson General Hospital. Grew up in Paterson for a little bit before moving, quote, to the suburbs, end quote, which is a cute little town called Glen Rock in Bergen County. So that's where I consider my hometown. Finished grade school, junior high, high school, the whole deal there. Is one of your classic suburban towns, 2 railroad lines, buses. Everybody goes off to commute somewhere to go to work. And it really had a very good school system, so I got a great education there, I feel. And then went off to do undergraduate work at Syracuse University. So spent a couple years up there in the North Country, enjoyed that. Wound up with a degree and didn't quite figure out what to do with an undergraduate degree in geography. So took a year off, bummed around a little, worked a lot, and then went to grad school at Columbia University at the School of Library Service, where I got a master's in library science. And that was finished up around 1976 with that degree.
Okay. Now, this is a little tongue-in-cheek, but would you say you were a bookish child? Were you a bookworm as a kid?
Well, absolutely. I love to read. It was a matter of trying to find, okay, you want to find yourself a career that you're going to enjoy and that you think you can accomplish. And so after getting out of library school, once again looking around, trying to find a job, wound up with a couple short-term things, but then wound up in a public library in Bergen County, Woodcliff Lake. Was there for a few years. Then moved on to the Hamilton Township Library down in Mercer County for a couple years. And then over here to Monmouth County, Middletown Township Public Library. Was director in those last 2 spots in Hamilton and Middletown. And then it just wasn't to my liking as much, and there was an opening at the Monmouth Medical Center for a medical librarian. Now, I'd had some medical background with EMT training and an interest in medicine and that sort of thing, and interviewed there, did well with all that, and they took me on board, and that was in the fall of 1985, and all these years later, I'm still at Monmouth Medical Center as director of the medical library.
Now, I was looking online, doing a little pre-interview research, and I was reading that the medical library at Monmouth Medical Center serves as the major information resource for the faculty, residents, and students in the Department of Medical Education and the staff. So I was reading that the library houses 4,000 monographs, 7,000 reels of microfilm, and some 2,000 bound journal volumes, in addition to subscriptions to all the relevant databases. I mean, wow. Talk to us a little bit about this incredible collection you manage.
It's a great job. The reason I've been there so long is I get to work with really nice people. We have a really heads-up operation going there in academic medicine because we're one of the major teaching hospitals in New Jersey. We have 8 residency programs with 130 residents. We're affiliated with Rutgers University, Robert Wood Johnson Medical School. And so we get 40, 50 med students at a time rotating from there. We have students from Monmouth University for their PA students, and we have nursing students from various places. We have all sorts of training and educational programs there, so we really are an educational institution. And so along with that crew, which is educationally oriented, I get to work with administration because I field calls from them for materials. All the nurses that are on staff, many of them are taking advanced courses or going back to school. And just all the other things you would expect a medical library to do, that comes to my attention. And people know where to find me. They pick up the phone. They send me an email. They track me down. And in addition to that, I've got the archives and special collections for the hospital, because the hospital is about 130 plus years old. We were the first hospital at the Jersey Shore. And so that means I've got some fantastic things ranging from Board of Trustees minutes from the 1800s to old photographs to books documenting patient care and anything else you can imagine that's of a clinical bent, or when they had to build a new building or opened a new facility. It's all there.
That's incredible. What advice do you have for emerging professionals who want to get involved in libraries, archives, or museums?
Well, it's got to be of interest to you. When I was growing up, since my father was a history teacher in Patterson at the Eastside High School, and my mother happened to be a librarian at the Patterson Public Library for most of her life here in this country, because she was also an immigrant, as was my father, who came from Poland, and my mother came from Germany. There was a lot of interest in education, traveling around, and visiting historical things. And so if you're not interested in that, if you don't have an affinity for it, you're not going to get very far. But if you do, then you should go and experience a lot of things. As far as educationally, take a lot of courses, anything you can get your hands on to learn about how to do things. And then you can decide what kind of track you're going to follow. Museums, archives, libraries, all different tracks, but all somewhat related and usually grouped together in whatever university you're going to. And so once you get into an undergraduate situation, take a bunch of different courses and see where your interests lie.
Okay. I could talk to you about your career for the whole hour, but let's move on to our focus, the
Sure.
Mid-Atlantic Regional Archives Conference, or MARAC. So when, roughly, would you say you got involved in the group?
I got active in MARAC back in the mid-'80s. There were a large number of people that I had run into: Carl Niederer, Elslin Palmisano, Gary Soretsky, Bob Stewart. A lot of these people were all Monmouth County librarians or archivists. Was running into them at programs, doing meetings, doing events with them, and learned about MARAC and said, that's for me. That's what I want to do. I mean, I was active professionally in the American Library Association, Medical Library Association, New Jersey Library Association, all that sort of stuff on the library profession end. But then archives and history was one of my major interests, of course.
Mm-hmm. How would you describe the organization when you were getting involved in the mid-'80s?
It's a lot like it is today, because it's majorly a volunteer organization. There is an executive director who handles a lot of the organizational and management stuff, but everyone else is a volunteer, from the president of MARAC right on down through to the local organizations, which are all state-based. So here in the New Jersey Caucus, we have a chair for the caucus, but everybody's volunteering on committees. And I managed to get active in a lot of that when they were doing a conference here in the state, either running exhibits, being on local arrangements, being in the program committee, that sort of thing, and participating. And it's a great way to meet the people who are actually accomplishing things and running programs and doing training and learning about everything that you could possibly want to imagine that has to do with archives and history. And that's what always kept it interesting, because you have a variety of people from everything from corporate to academic to public archives, and they all have different fields of expertise, and it's a great opportunity to learn about all these things.
So going back to your early involvement in the mid-'80s, even at that point, they had the state caucuses, they had the committee infrastructure, they had their conferences in place?
Yes. And the conferences are held all around the Mid-Atlantic region, and I've been in conferences Virginia, Pennsylvania, Delaware, New York State, and of course New Jersey always hosts a bunch of them, because we're right here in the middle.
For our early career professionals who might be listening to this, why is it so important to network, to find the time to go to these conferences?
You can have as much book learning as you want and as many diplomas on the wall as you want. But until you get out in the field and start running into issues, problems, projects that you want to accomplish, the major advantage of having access to an organization like MARAC is that when there's a question, you'll either know who you can call or you know who you can call to tell you who to call. To not so much solve the problem as to give you guidance and say, well, do you know about this? You should learn about this. And give not just straight information, but guidance as to where you can go next when you're trying to accomplish something at your home institution.
That's so important. Now, you have been very involved in the Caucus Archives Projects Evaluation Service, or CAPES. I think you told me you remember it being conceived of in 1989, was it?
Right. The MARAC New Jersey Caucus has always had great relationships with other historical organizations that are both, private, county, public, but also with the New Jersey Historical Commission. The New Jersey Historical Commission is one of the great agencies in New Jersey and really works not just to promote history, but to save history, to teach history here in the state. And one of the things the Historical Commission always did was to have grant programs available to help people preserve, teach, or exhibit New Jersey history. And they would do these, they would receive grant proposals from different organizations, and the reviewers, who are professionals all around the state and on staff at the commission, would look at these proposals and say, well, that's really nice, but we really don't know anything about the organization. And so back in 1989, Dick Waldron, who was at the New Jersey Historical Commission, and Carl Niederer, who was New Jersey State Archivist, came up with an idea that we would make available experts from MARAC, people who knew archives, who would go out into the community and assist organizations that had New Jersey collections and to do an evaluation of their collection. And then once that evaluation was done, that would be like a reference resource for anyone that was looking at a grant proposal. So you have archivists and trained individuals who are already working in history that would go on site to an organization, talk about what they have available, how is it organized, how are they structured, are they taking good care of their materials, are they in a good building, everything about their collection, how they're organized, what kind of staff do they have, are they training their staff, do they have a disaster manual in place, are these collections organized or are they just haphazardly dumped somewhere? And after this evaluation was done, and it was in a written format, and we're currently now using a formal template for this. Once it's done and all written up, the evaluation person who's on site talking to the staff there comes up with a list of recommendations. And oftentimes, these recommendations will refer exactly to what the organization wants to apply for a grant. And so when the grant reviewer needs to learn about the organization, they can see, well, does it make sense for them to ask for money to microfilm? What do they have? Does it make sense for them to ask for a grant to run an exhibit and an educational program with a local organization because of their specific collections? And so this is all in support of the New Jersey Historical Commission's grant to promote and safeguard history, and it gives them the leg up when it comes time to evaluate the grant proposals. And so this has been going on since 1989, and we've done probably around 550 grants all around the state.
Wow. Now, just to make sure I understand, it's a dual purpose, right? It helps the organization because they have a professional give them some guidance, right? A clear-eyed assessment of how they're doing and what they might do better, and that it also helps the granting agencies to know who they're working with and make those decisions about who can properly manage the funds, right?
That's exactly right, Melissa. So many times you can be as good as you want in-house and you can make all these wonderful recommendations, but until the outside expert, and let's put quotes around that, until the outside expert comes in and actually looks around, takes photos, which are significant, and now that we're doing more digital, photos are a significant part of all the reports. The expert comes in, takes the photos, wanders around from the basement to the attic, and I've been, trust me, in a lot of basements and attics all around the Garden State, looking at collections and buildings, and comes back with a report and tells the people, listen, here are your priorities. These are things you should address. These are things you have to be careful about. These are things that you need to take care of next.
Now, I must say, I have recommended some organizations get a CAPES evaluation, and I always think of it as a very positive thing. But I have seen that some people feel perhaps a bit nervous or self-conscious about inviting that type of self-awareness, that analysis in. What would you say to an organization who is considering getting a CAPES analysis done, but they're like, oh, I don't want someone to come in and tell us all the things we're doing wrong? What would you say to that?
Well, let me digress for just a second. The way CAPES operates is it's the grant money to run CAPES comes from the New Jersey Historical Commission. And they've been very good about supplying funds, because when you have trained professionals, and these are really people that know what they're talking about, that are going out into the community, they do get a stipend for visiting and sometimes traveling a fair distance, even if it's in New Jersey, traveling, evaluating on site for most of a day, coming back, and then writing a report to submit. This is all coordinated by a coordinator for CAPES. And as one of the roles I started off doing, of course, as a surveyor for CAPES, but then I ran the program as the CAPES coordinator for about 9 years, which is probably about a quarter of the time CAPES has been around, and I've run into just that situation. We've gone to people and said, oh, you'd really like to have this CAPES report, and they just look at you. Maybe they take the paperwork you're offering them. You'll never hear from the thing again, or they'll say, but, does that mean you're going to come and look at my stuff? Absolutely. Well, we all know that a lot of historical associations are not exactly interested in people coming to look at their stuff, let alone poking around in the corners of their buildings, let alone asking, well, how are you structured? Do you have a board of trustees? Do you have a budget? There are a lot of places that are put off by this. And there are places to this day that, we know they're on the list, or we've given them materials, and we're just never going to hear from them. But the places we have heard from, when I did my coordinator's report twice a year, there was always a section in the coordinator's report that talked about comments from our clients. And I'm talking about rave reviews. First off, they would compliment the people that came. They were astonished about how knowledgeable they were, how they would ask just the right questions, that when the client responded in a certain way, they would know exactly the next question to ask, or would anticipate exactly what the client was going to say, because these are all people with experience. So not only were they happy with the people that came out to do the evaluation, they were impressed about how thorough they were, how they spent the time, they looked around, didn't ignore things, and then were willing to sit down with a client and answer questions. Because these are somewhat of an educational experience for the people that are requesting the survey. People are encouraged, now it's been a little different with CAPES, people were encouraged to bring a few people along as part of the survey so they could ask questions and provide information. But as we go along, when people would say, well, why do you recommend this? And there would be an immediate answer. But the final thing is, after all is said and done and the surveyor goes home, the report that comes back and goes to the Historical Commission, so they have it as a reference tool, but more importantly, goes to the client. The client will have a report, and we're not talking about 2 or 3 pages. We're talking about 25, 30, a 40-page report that is going to say, I went here to this organization. This is how they're organized. This is where their building is. This is what their building looks like, what it's constructed. Is there fire protection? Is there a disaster plan? Here are the collections they have. Here's how they're housed. What kind of heating, air conditioning, light protection? Do they have exhibits? How is the stuff exhibited? How are the collections organized? What kind of people are working there? Are they trained? Are they not trained? And then at the end of the report, there is a list of recommendations based on what the surveyor found. And these recommendations are all set up to help the client say, oh, wait a minute, yeah, I should give that a priority. This is something we've been talking about for a long time, and we really should get to it. And this is what the client can then take to the operating board of governors, board of trustees, a township, perhaps the trustees of the university, or the people running the town the people in town that are running the historical site, say, listen, we've had an expert come in and hear all these recommendations. Now, this may have been something the group's been agitating for the last 5 or 10 years, but when an outside expert comes in and puts it on paper and attaches photographs, then all of a sudden it means a lot more. Mm-hmm. So anybody that misses out on getting a CAPES report is missing out on really an opportunity, because CAPES reports have led to a lot of major successes and accomplishments for different organizations in New Jersey.
I think that was an excellent way to reach out to any organizations who might be nervous and say, listen, don't be scared. This is all in the spirit of protecting and preserving the shared cultural and historic treasures that we all love, right? We're all on the same team here.
That's true. It's really, it is a collaborative effort. I mean, when I go into a place and do a survey, it's like one of the first questions I ask is, well, why am I really here? Mm-hmm. And you'll find the group's been asking for this or begging for that or trying to improve something. And that can naturally then become part of the report.
You said that you give a copy of the evaluation to the client. Does CAPES, MARAC, or the New Jersey Historical Commission keep a comprehensive database of these reports?
Yes, we have. It's more of a listing than a database. We track who the report is for, and we will do a report for almost anyone with a collection of New Jersey historical materials that has these materials available to the public. So we're talking about schools, we're talking about colleges, we're talking about universities, local historical associations, public libraries, along that sort of line. And so the list we keep, first off, tells the name of the organization, the county they're in, the date the place was visited, and then who did the survey. And we probably should have made it a little more extensive and more data in it when we started it, but it's there and exists, so we can literally pull out, how many surveys were done in Monmouth County, or how many surveys were done in 1994, like that. Okay.
But you don't keep the full 30 to 40 page reports?
Yes. Now, that's the next part. All the reports are kept. One of the things I did when I was coordinator, I made an effort. Once again, when we started, there were big differences between computers in 1989 and computers in 2020. When we started, there were no one necessarily kept electronic copies of these reports. As a matter of fact, the first CAPES report that was done was by Elsalyn Palmisano of the Manville Public Library. I have to get a plug-in for them and her. So one of my priorities as coordinator, I got the backup files from the previous person, and I looked at it and I said, I think maybe there were, let's call it 20 or 30 or 40 electronic copies of CAPES reports. Mm-hmm. By the time I finished, we had more than 200 copies. That's a factor of all the reports now being done digitally and available digitally, and me harassing people to make sure I got a digital copy. But for the Manville report, obviously that was literally typed on a computer, handed in, and that was it. And I don't even know what software program was used for that. And there were hand-drawn pictures of the floor plan, everything. So one of the things I did was I went and got a copy of the report and scanned it, and boom, okay, there's now a PDF copy of it.
Wow.
this was done repeatedly for different individuals, and a lot of times people will come back and ask for a second CAPES report. Or people, we will run into people and we will be promoting it and say, oh, I'd love to have that. And you pull the list out and you find out, yes, they did have a CAPES report. And you say, well, you had a CAPES report done. And this could be 5, 10, 20 years ago. Doesn't matter. They just don't have a copy. Stuff disappears. So that's when we do have a CAPES coordinators collection, which has a complete run of every, physically on print. Nothing wrong with print. It always works. It's always there. It always works. A print copy of all these reports, and print copies of the finances, print copies of correspondence, print copies of programs we've done, print copies of PowerPoint presentations, you name it. So we do have copies of all this electronically and in print, and that's when we can go pull out a copy of a CAPES report that was done a little while ago sometimes, give it to the organization, say, if you really want a second report. Why? Well, they might have moved to a new facility. They might have gotten a new collection. It might just have been 20, 25 years. But the first thing we say is look at your old report and tell us what you did with the recommendations we made. Then come to us and we'll talk about it, and then we can consider a second visit. Now, where I work, Monmouth Medical Center, we had there was nothing being collected back when I came to the library in '85. I started collecting some things, had a CAPES report done early on, made some recommendations, started following that, and that was great. But then later on, when we got actual space to build an archives and fill it with shelves and start collecting and stuff, we asked for another CAPES report. Elson Palmisano came in, did a CAPES report, made recommendations, talked about getting a consultant, talked about improving the collection methods, getting proper archival supplies, and voila, we used that report to start doing all those things, and taking on Elsa Lynn, because she was very experienced in healthcare archives, to come on board and serve as a consultant for many years and do work in collecting and organizing and publicizing these materials, so that when the 125th anniversary of the hospital came around, we had things we could use. We put up a historical plaque. We had a historical exhibit. We're doing lectures around Monmouth County and for like the Medical History Society of New Jersey, and doing lectures for them about the history of Monmouth Memorial Hospital, later Monmouth Medical Center. So this is where the CAPES report all led to.
I love that even you subjected yourself to a CAPES.
Absolutely.
Right? Even you.
Absolutely.
And I want to circle back just a bit, because you mentioned that Dick Waldron was someone who was critical in the creation of the CAPES program, and of course Dick passed away recently. Could you just tell us a little bit about what you remember about Dick?
Dick had been forever at the New Jersey Historical Commission by the time I met him. He was very active in writing and teaching and working with historical groups around New Jersey, and later on then became the actual director of the Historical Commission. And so there was a lot of interaction with him because I was active in other historical organizations, and of course he was a friend of MARAC and the New Jersey Caucus, and was quite enthusiastic and realized that the idea of doing CAPES was not just going to benefit the historical organizations and help people with their home collections and home organizations, but it was going to work for the New Jersey Historical Commission and furthering their mission.
In the very helpful notes that you gave me, you said the first CAPES coordinator was Lois Densky.
Yes.
And that initially folks were supposed to do 2-year terms.
Right.
You did 9. I mean, so,
yeah, well, you know.
What happened to the 2-year term limit?
Well, I was reminded that I should mention all the CAPES coordinators, so I'll rattle them off. So Lois Densky was first. She set the bar and and she took it from nothing to getting it going. Bob Stewart then came on board. Dan Jones, he was the next one. Elson Palmisano served a term as CAPES coordinator. Carla Tobias came on board next. Elizabeth Shepard came after that. I came on board after Elizabeth, and then, I don't know, I was just having too much fun. But really, what it really worked out was I was in partnership with Elsalyn Palmisano, who was one of the previous CAPES coordinators and who's also here in Monmouth County. And we teamed up on doing the coordinator work. There was no direct division of labor. It was just we worked and got done whatever needed to get done, tracked down what needed to get done, worked with whoever needed working. And so that was one of the reasons I was able to really survive that long. As I said, there were some real goals there, like making sure that the archives of the CAPES coordinator were kept and forwarded to Gary Soretsky, who took very good care of them at the Monmouth County Archives for many years, and to make sure that we didn't lose stuff and there was a good history of the operation. Then getting digital copies of all these things, and then formalizing some things and making sure people were using the templates. We revised that right at the beginning of my term. We spent some time revising the template, which is the guide for writing a CAPES report. And then we also revised the resource list. One of the things we give to all our clients as well is what we call the resource list. And it's everything from places to go online to find forms, information, documents. It lists books you can read, articles you should look at, how to write disaster plans, all that sort of stuff. And also places where you can go to get help. And the professional organizations such as MARAC, such as the Society of American Archivists, New Jersey Library Association, where you can find like-minded individuals who are interested in history and archives. And so all this was some of the stuff that literally took the first year or two of my term. And then we went on to do other things.
You mentioned CAPES materials residing with former Monmouth County Archivist Gary Soretsky. Is that where the CAPES files are still maintained at the Monmouth County Archives?
The CAPES coordinator files are right now at the Monmouth County Archives until we find them a new home. Because the CAPES is in partnership with the New Jersey Historical Commission, all the materials we send them, they hang on to, and when they're not using them anymore, those are all filed with the New Jersey State Archives, because the Historical Commission is part of the state government. So it's nice. There's sort of a two-track system for keeping tabs on things. Both collections are probably pretty complete, but it's nice having two places to go if you need it.
Yeah. You noted that you've done probably close to 550 CAPES evaluations, the program has.
Right.
And you noted they're often linked to major anniversaries.
Yes.
We know, exhibits are often linked, programs
Right.
is often linked. Tell us a little more about why you think the CAPES evaluations are often linked to major anniversaries.
Because sometimes I will be talking, or one of the CAPES consultants will be talking with someone out there, and let's say, oh yeah, it's the 100th anniversary of this library coming up. I'm thinking of a particular library right now where I know somebody. And it's like, I said, oh, are you, do you have a history written about your library? Where do you have all your Board of Trustees minutes? Where do you have all the historical photos? And they look at you and they say, well, it's in the basement. It's in a filing cabinet. The board president has them. It's like, I don't know. Same thing, and sometimes worse, with no offense intended, for historical organizations, some of whom don't have a particular home. And so, yes, the president might have a filing cabinet, but then the past 2 or 3 presidents might all have filing cabinets with materials. And we're not talking about the collections of the group, we're just talking about the history of the group now. But then you start getting into collections, and well, yeah, but they're in the basement of the municipal building, or somebody put them in the old firehouse, or we know they're somewhere, but we'd have to ask somebody to find them. And this is why when the anniversaries come up, that prompts people to start thinking about, well, geez, the library's been here 100 years. The hospital's been here 125 years. We even just have a, in-between anniversary coming up, and somebody was asking about it. Why don't we have an exhibit and show stuff off to show how we belong in the community? Because that's always what it comes down to. whether it's an academic institution or a school library somewhere. Yeah, what are you, where are you in the community, and what have you been doing for the past how many years?
Can you comment on any strengths and weaknesses in the partnership with the New Jersey Historical Commission?
I'll be honest. There haven't been any weaknesses. COVID was a hassle because it made communications and getting stuff back and forth a little more difficult. But the strength has always been the collaboration that goes on. It's not just a funding situation. It's not just, hi, we're doing reports for you situation. It's back and forth. What are you working on? What do you need? Have you considered this? Why aren't we doing this? Would this help you more? Would this be of more interest to what you needed the report for? And so when there used to be in-person conferences every year for the New Jersey Historical Commission, that was a great opportunity to bring CAPES there and get it exposed to, all the people that would come to a Historical Commission conference. We also try and exhibit it to other groups all around. So when the Mid-Atlantic Regional Archives Conference did a conference in Newark, CAPES had a table there showing stuff off. We also did a poster session. We've done programs for the New Jersey Library Association, so that libraries that have, long histories in their communities can get assistance with their collections and materials. Obviously, local historical collections and historical associations, so we exhibit at the League of Historical Societies of New Jersey. And we show off to them and say, you can get help here if you're looking for it. Because many times these are very good heads-up volunteers, but they don't have necessarily the professional training they would love. And even when we do exhibits or programs for a group like I've presented at the Medical History Society of New Jersey, you say, what? Well, these are all doctors and physicians that go back to hospitals or medical clinics that have been in New Jersey for 50, 75, 100 plus years, and they all have historical collections. Say, you mean we can go back and get a CAPES report and you'll help us organize our collections and preserve our history? And we go, exactly. And so we've probably done at least 20 to 30 CAPES reports just for hospitals in the state of New Jersey.
You mentioned COVID briefly. Did CAPES pause during COVID, or did you find ways to kind of continue the work?
CAPES had problems with COVID, big problems. Number one, the consultants doing the reports weren't necessarily anxious to go out. And number two, a lot of the places were closed. You saw the signs everywhere you went. Places were closed. Even things like libraries were closed. So there was no access to these places. And basically, it just disrupted the whole model of you have an institution, they're open, they're doing stuff, they have questions, they'd love somebody to come in and work with them. That went by the boards. That was not happening. We're getting back into it slowly now. I've got an application from a historical society right here in Monmouth County. They're getting some paperwork and getting their act into gear. I'll go visit them. Obviously, it'll be with mass, and instead of maybe having 3 or 4 or 5 people tag along to ask questions and work with them, I'll probably lower that number to maybe 1 or 2. Always happy to answer the questions, but you're less likely to want to get a group of people to do that. And so COVID did have an impact. That really cut back on the number of reports.
Let's say there's a potential surveyor listening to this. Why should they get involved?
Number one, it's a lot of fun. Most of the people that are into history and archives or in the whole educational field love to learn stuff. And there's no better way to learn. I've been in, well, not every county. I've probably done a CAPES report in half the counties in New Jersey. All right? I'm talking about from Bergen County south to Cape May. And it's interesting. You learn things. You meet interesting people. And there's also that helping aspect. Now, the surveyors do get a stipend for the work. It started off as, for the whole operation, they got paid $125 for the report, and we're getting whatever it was, mileage. Nowadays, you're getting $500 for a report, but you're still getting like 31 cents a mile, which is a little sad. So I'll be honest, no one's doing it for the money, but they're doing it to give back. Mm-hmm. And they're doing it because they're interested in promoting history and helping an organization hang on to their materials and take better care of them, to ultimately make it available for the person that walks in the door and is trying to research something in that town, that school, or wherever.
What do you personally enjoy the most about the CAPES program?
I did enjoy the coordinator job because I got to read a lot of fun reports, to be honest. Obviously, I read everything that came across my desk. So that was very enjoyable. But I myself have done probably around 25 reports, I guess, something like that. And I've done them in hospitals. I've done them in colleges. I've done them in schools. I've done them in historical societies. I've done them for various preservation groups. So it's a whole cross-section of, quote, history organizations, end quote. And so that means there's a whole bunch of different kinds of materials. And you're always dealing with people who are interested and committed to taking care of a piece of New Jersey's history. It's their little piece, their town's little piece or whatever, but they want to take care of this, and you realize that if you work with them and you spend some time with them and you get them set up and give them a report that will guide them on their next steps, that you can play a role in saving New Jersey history. And that's no small thing, because we're talking about New Jersey, and very few places have the kind of history we have here.
Yeah. We talked about COVID, of course, but are there any other challenges that CAPES has faced over the years?
I can't really think of any major challenges that would compare to COVID. There's always the shuffling around. Okay, who's available? You know, all of a sudden, I mean, there have been months when all of a sudden 5 or 6 reports come in, applications come in, because an application needs to be completed by a group, and it gets submitted to the historical commission and to the coordinator before it's approved. And so sometimes you get 5 or 6 of these come in over the transom all in one shot. And you say, okay, first things first. Where is it? We do have a cadre of consultants, about a dozen of us, that are out there ready to do reports. And so, who's available? Who's available right now? Nobody's going to do them over the holidays usually. Summer vacations can be a little tough for some scheduling, but ultimately that's it. It all gets caught up over the next few months. You know, people get assigned, people get out there, the reports get done. But no, there's really not been any other kind of issues with that.
Can you, if you're comfortable, tell us about some of the most interesting CAPES evaluations you've been on?
Okay, that's fine. What I'll actually do is I'll integrate some I know about as well. I have firsthand knowledge of that maybe I didn't do. As I said, literally anyone with a collection of New Jersey historical materials that they are willing to show off and they're willing to make available can apply for a CAPES survey. So there was this historic church, 150, 170 years old in Cape May. Amazing. This goes back. They had a collection of historical materials. They had famous parishioners. They played a major role in the community. And so they wanted someone to come down, and that required rummaging in the basement, rummaging in back offices, crawling around looking at stuff, and giving us some good guidance about, well, the first thing you have to do is figure out where you're going to take this stuff, because you really got to get it out of that basement that I was crawling around in with a headlamp a little while ago. But then this led to, positive aspects, and they took off from there. There have been public libraries who have had a CAPES report done, just time to have a CAPES report done, nothing special, nothing going on otherwise. But then this led to the Board of Trustees saying, well, if we, working with the staff saying, well, if we arrange things, we can take over, we can move stuff around, we can claim this room for the archives, we can lock it to make it secure, we'll buy some shelving, we'll get a grant for the archival supplies, we'll get a consultant to come in part-time to help organize it, and then all of a sudden, instead of just having stuff, they've got a room with a collection and a finding aid and someone assigned and hours where somebody can come by and actually do work. And this has happened at small public libraries in Monmouth County or large urban libraries in other places in the state. So this is really how it works. There was a historical group that was really like a local preservation society here. And wonderful people, top notch. They're really great. They showed us some stuff, went to a room that was in the municipal building, and they literally had to take stuff out of the room and put it in the hall so we could get into the room. Okay, that was interesting. So, you don't show up in a suit and tie to these operations. So you're moving stuff around, and so you could see what they had. And lo and behold, we said, well, this is really interesting, but this is not really municipal records type stuff. This is general history. How come you don't have a historical society? So they said, well, we'd kick that around. And so we said, well, why don't you get a historical society going? And so after the report was done, they decided and contacted the consultants. And the consultants, I was one of them, Elsalyn was the other. The consultant said, well, if you're going to do a historical society, you can do this, 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 and this. Mm-hmm. And so gave them a lot of guidance. And so all of a sudden they go from literally a small room that was filled with stuff to, there's a space in the back of a historical firehouse in town. And you can set up an archive storage area here, and you can set up exhibits here, and you can set up a little gallery here where people can walk through the stuff. Oh, nice. Well, they were about to have an opening and Sandy hit. That's one of your interests, I know. And so literally weeks before they were about to have their opening, Sandy hit, trashed them. They have since rebuilt, regrooved, restored it, and they're an up and running historical society which has a role in town and is happy to show off their history. And so, candidly, I mentioned Monmouth Medical Center before and how we parlayed the report into a real archive space, doing exhibits, doing lectures in the hospital, doing lectures around the county for historical groups. These are the kind of things that really happens. And one of the more interesting things right now is have been the CAPES reports for the New Jersey Library Association. You're going, oh, the Library Association has history? Well, the New Jersey Library Association is the largest library organization, obviously, in New Jersey, and it's one of the oldest ones in the country as well. And so they have a collection, and they had a CAPES report done back in the 90s. They have since moved, have a new space, don't have room, and the archives are in temporary storage. So they needed another CAPES report. Gary Soretsky just finished his second CAPES report. As part of this, an Archives and History Committee was set up inside the New Jersey Library Association to take the CAPES report and the recommendations and figure out how to organize these materials and give them a better home, but more importantly, make them available for research, not just by librarians, but from people interested in the history of libraries and so forth in New Jersey, and safeguard this for people that are coming down the road.
You just mentioned Superstorm Sandy, which of course devastated some of our local archives, small museums, etc. Can you talk a little bit on that topic about the importance of a disaster plan, which is one of the things CAPES looks for in organizations, right?
Yeah, that's actually a whole segment in the template. And once again, the template guides the reviewer on what to cover and what to ask. And one of the basic questions, do you have one? Yes, no. Here's where you can go to look at some samples. Here's where you can find out how to start building one. You can have a big disaster plan or a little disaster plan, but you should have a disaster plan if you have an organization of any kind, let alone an organization with paper records or artifacts and so forth. This can be everything from as basic as to, in an emergency, here's who gets called first. And now we're talking about calling, and we're talking about addresses, knocking on doors. This is not the kind of thing that's buried in a filing cabinet at your institution. It's a thing that all the officers and all the principals should have in their houses, carrying in their cars, wherever you want to have it. But this tells you what you need to do first, and usually that's notification. But even before that, if you have a disaster plan, then that encourages you to work with the groups in your community that will be dealing with the disaster. So even if you're talking about the police, the ambulance, but particularly the fire department or any rescue groups you have in town, they will know, oh, this is this historical study. Okay, yeah, we've got, we know who to call. We know who to call out. And we know if we call them, we're going to get a response and they're going to come down. But more importantly, once that happens and they arrive and everybody arrives, you can say, okay, this is what we have to do first. And this is what we have to do second. And once you've gone through the first 100 or first 1,000 things, then it starts covering, okay, for recovery or rehabilitation of materials, here are some places we can call. Is there somebody in the state we can call? What corporations can we call? Who are our friends that we can call? If it's a library, can we call the next couple libraries and say, hey, you know, we need some help? And there are statewide organizations from the New Jersey Cultural Alliance for Response and the New Jersey State Library that are around and available to help.
That's so important, right? As we hear, we might see more and more of these devastating storms, that organizations are really on top of that.
Or we just had, you know, the remnants of Ian roll through New Jersey. I don't know about at your house, but my rain meter topped out at 5 inches and then it overflowed. And all you need is a very small leak somewhere or a stop drain on a roof, and someone's going to come into a building and with a very ugly surprise, and hopefully it won't be over their archives or their most sensitive records or historical materials.
I'm going to pull back out from CAPES and ask you a couple closing questions about MARAC more broadly, but is there anything else you would like to say about CAPES before I do that?
No, that was good. We covered a lot about what CAPES does, and the important thing is it's still alive and well, and that people can contact the New Jersey Historical Commission on their webpage or on the MARAC webpage for the New Jersey Caucus and learn more about CAPES. And you don't have to commit. You can just get information or ask questions.
Good. All right, so then back to the broader umbrella of MARAC. How has MARAC changed over the years since you've been involved?
In a lot of ways, it hasn't changed because it's still a very friendly organization. That's really a great way to describe it, and that there are a lot of people that are interested in learning, interested in visiting other archives, and that is one of the main features of going to a MARAC conference. You get a chance to go to archives and historical places, and you don't get the public tour. You go to the back rooms. You get to see, as I always like to call it, the good stuff, which is a real treat. So if you're at the Virginia Library and you're getting a tour and the guy takes his folder out with his gloves on and opens it up and you're looking at a hunk of paper and say, that's interesting. Oh, it looks like a land survey. That's really cool. And you see George Washington's signature in the corner and you're going, oh, okay. And you're impressed. That's a great part of MARAC. The socializing and the learning, the education, but really they also run training courses, and if you want to learn more about how to take care of materials and how to run an archives, there are opportunities to do continuing education with MARAC. And this is what MARAC has always been doing, and so in some ways it really hasn't changed. Obviously there's more concentration on digital archives description and that sort of stuff. But the same basics are still there. The opportunity to travel, visit archives, hear programs about organizations that are much like yours, that do a lot like yours, and that you can then meet somebody who just gave a lecture on that and say, that's fascinating. You know, I have the same situation, and then sit down over lunch and talk to them about it and learn. Or collaborate further.
I was going to ask you next some strengths of the organization,
yeah,
but I think we just covered that, right? The networking, the professional development, the
yes.
backstage passes.
Yeah, it's the same with any professional organization. This is why you belong. Yeah.
What about any areas of growth for the organization, or areas you think they need to kind of keep their eye on in the next few years?
This stuff always recycles, comes up to the top. It's like, how are we running meetings? COVID obviously interfered with face-to-face meetings. The next meeting in MARAC will be this month at College Park, Maryland, at the University of Maryland. It is the 50th anniversary of the formation of MARAC, and they're going back to where MARAC started, and actually where the MARAC archives are on campus of the University of Maryland. And so the opportunities are all there for all this education and stuff. And of course, you have the National Archives and Records Administration archives too, right there. All these things are part of that. And it just has to learn to adapt to people can't travel as much. It's more expensive to travel. And so doing more through Zoom meetings and online sessions, that has taken up some of the slack, but that is still not, it doesn't take the place of of what really works.
So we're here this afternoon for the new MARAC New Jersey Caucus 50th Anniversary Oral History Project. Why did you want to participate in the Oral History Project?
It's really pretty simple. I like history, and if you're not willing to give back and make the history, and so whether you're doing a report to help an organization do the history, or you're sitting down to tell your experiences and talk about what you've done and what you've experienced and what the fun part of all doing the history is all about, if you're not willing to participate and exert yourself a little bit, then no one else is going to make the history either.
Well, I think that is a absolutely perfect place to end. Is there anything else you wanted to add that we haven't covered?
I just want to thank you for your time and making yourself available to do this and being part of the MARAC 50th anniversary.
Awesome. I'll go ahead and stop the recording.